Welcome everyone, Dylan Gemelli here today with a brand new video for you. So today I want to talk to you about steroids that should not be used by beginners. But before we get into that, I want to reiterate, I'm not a doctor, so anything I say in these videos is for your entertainment purposes only. I'm not advising nor condoning you to use any of the things that we talk about, and what you do with this information is completely up to you. So let's talk about steroids that are not for beginners. Now, obviously on a first cycle, you really want to keep things to one compound. All right, but on your second cycle and even really relatively going into your third cycle, give or take for some people, you're still kind of considered a beginner. So what I want to talk to you about are steroids that you definitely should not be messing around with in your early stages of cycling and steroid use. Okay, I know there's people that just that they have this mentality and this concept. Well, I'm just going to go all in because I'm all or nothing. You know, when you're training and whatever, yeah, you go all in, you go as hard as you can. You know, I'm all for that. But when you're talking about steroids and putting in, you know, outside stimulus into your body for the first time and things like this, or even the second time, that is not the time to go all in. This is completely different. We're talking about your health here and what you're putting into your body. And there's certain compounds that you need to work your way up to. They're just not smart to go in as an inexperienced user. Number one is tren. All right? I see guys that say they're going to run tren on their first cycle, and I cringe to the highest extent. Tren is not, and I repeat, not for beginners. Tren is something that you work your way up to. Tren is one of the harsher steroids you can use. Yeah, there's some others that you can argue that are really not as mainstream or whatever. Tren is one of the most, actually, it is the most popular steroid. It's the most talked about. It's the most sought after. You could say D-ball or Deca traditionally, but let's face it. Everybody says tren is the king. Everybody is intrigued by it. I mean, that's just the way it is. D-ball and Deca, they're more widely used, but tren is the most intriguing and it's the most popular because it's the most talked about and because it does the most. But it has the most side effects to an extent. Okay, you can argue about certain other things that aren't as common. But basically, tren is going to have some of the most and harshest side effects. It is not something that you take as a beginner. It's just not. You need to work your way up to that level. Start with lower and easier compounds. All right? And then get up to that level. Tren is literally the worst thing you can use as a beginner, or at least one of the worst. With all of the different wide array of side effects that you could endure with tren, you know, your body is not ready for that. And mentally, on top of all of the physical problems that you could have mentally as well, and early on in your steroid usage career, or whatever you want to call it, that is not something that you want to have going on, messing with your head as well as, you know, when you're messing with emotions and the physical aspect of it, and you're not even used to how you respond to anything, that is one of the worst ideas that I could possibly come up with. Number two, halotestin. Do not use halotestin if you're a beginner. It is so toxic and so rough, all right? And once again, with the emotional side, because of the fierce aggression that you can come with, you know, with halotestin, it can make you into a monster. And I'm not talking big monster. I'm talking like an emotional, mental monster. You know, that's why a lot of guys that are fighting, you know, MMA, things like that, Halo's their choice because it makes you so aggressive. But it's not something to start with. The toxicity and the aggression are so overwhelming and so strong, your body is nowhere near ready for that in your early stages of steroid use. Number three, Anadrol. Now, Anadrol, once again, is very toxic, very rough on your blood pressure, cholesterol, liver. You know, these are things that you're going to get with oral steroids, but Anadrol's on another level to the extent of how harsh that it is and how much damage that it can really do to you. And it's one of those things where you could maybe get away with it, you know, earlier on, but I would advise you using less harsh orals like a T-ball and Anavar, my favorite, not. Even D-ball, because D-ball's not as, you know, toxic as Anadrol is. And a lot of people do run D-ball in their earlier stages. I don't have that big of an issue with that, to be honest with you. I just have the issue of the misuse, you know, misunderstanding estrogen, running it too long, running it too high. Anadrol is definitely something that you should really, really avoid in the early stages of steroid use. Another one that I see people often jump to right away is Superdrol. And I made the mistake of using Superdrol very early on, in my days of using, which I'm, pretty much past now. Superdrol is like Anadrol. It's extremely toxic, and for me, far worse, to be honest with you. And it's something that can really mentally hurt and strain you because of how lethargic and like just bad moodish it can put you in, and the amount of strain that it puts on you internally. It's definitely not something that I would recommend going into early on. Now, something not so mainstream that's not as popular but is, has become more popular as time has gone on, Trestolone or Ment. That's another one I really would not consider using early on. The amount of estrogen conversion alone is the worst. You're going to be hard-pressed to show me anything that converts to estrogen at a higher rate. And that's something that, when it comes to estrogen, you need to really get dialed in. And that takes a while. And sometimes you never really get that fully dialed in. But you don't want to mess around with Trestolone early on, in your steroid usage time. It's just something that is just not wise whatsoever to be putting into your body early on. I'm still under the firm belief that Tren is number one, though, on this list, with good reason. I just, and here, let me give you this. A few steroids that are better for beginners in your early stages. Obviously, Test. Anavar's a lot lighter. T-Ball is on the lighter end. Masteron, Primobolan, these things are so much lighter. Equipoise, even Deca. If you run Deca right, side effects are going to be a lot lower, okay? So these are better compounds, when you're in your second and third cycles to really go with, to let your body adjust and get used to. They're much lighter. They're much easier on you. You can run them at a little bit higher dosage. You can just get a better feel for things. You work your way up to things that are harsher, okay? So start with these compounds. My recommendation would be when you're early stages of steroid use, work your way up. It's not a rush here. This is not a race. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Always remember that. So, Dylan Gemelli signing off.